Hola, my She Se Puede familia. We made it to Friday. It's the last day of this amazing tour, and welcome back. Thank you for spending this inspiring, informative, and empowering week with us. We hope you're filled with inspiration, armed with knowledge, and ready and excited to raise your voice and vote in this year's election. Thank you so much for choosing to join the She Se Puede community. We hope that we've filled you with pride and community and excitement this week. I know that this community gives that to me every single day. Check out this clip highlighting all the amazing conversations, the jam sessions, and all the beautiful moments of wisdom, community, and pride that we shared this week. Hello!
Hi! Hi! Being here. So excited to have this conversation with you guys.
Yes! How is everybody doing? I can't believe it. I can't believe that we are talking to thousands of Latinas across this country right now.
Voila.
Go out and vote for your local officials because they make direct impact on your community.
Only 46% of Latinx community voted last election.
I'm so excited for She Se Puede being exactly that. It's just really just talking about you who is watching right now, being critical and important. I am one vote, America. You are one vote, but together we are many.
Elections have begun. Remember on election day. Election is now.
Thanks for joining us.
Yay! I did my best to look like a superhero today. That is what I think you are.
It's about organizing us and registering us to vote and making our voices heard.
I was undocumented and became a U.S. citizen in 2014, and the first thing that I did in 2016 was run for office. I voted for the first time ever for a woman, for myself. That's my American dream.
So you really have to trust your gut. You really have to trust that there's other opportunities if you come across something that you know is wrong.
You now are an owner, right, of a share. You're a shareholder.
This generation, us, we have been chosen to lead our family to freedom.
My language, my culture is everything that I've needed to succeed.
Accents should be worn as medals. So medallas, because it actually shows that you speak more than one language.
I've come to realize that we're not invisible at all. We're actually invincible.
Your essence is golden. Your message is spoken. You will be heard. No question, just own it because it's yours.
¿Cómo fue ese proceso? Te naturalizaste y después al año puedes votar.
Te da mucho placer el saber que vas a tener voz y voto en este país.
There's strength in numbers, and when we unite, we make a change.
Hi, you look beautiful.
Verde para la esperanza, para que todo salga al pie de la letra.
Here at She Se Puede, we are all about holistic health and taking care of ourselves.
She Se Puede, girls. Love you.
With everything Latinos are facing, we need to believe She Se Puede right now. This is our moment to show what we are made of. Si se puede, she se puede.
I'm like, God, I'm just waiting for that woman to run because I would vote for her. And then you just sit there one day and you go, oh my gosh, it's me.
When we believe in our powerful and act on our power by voting, the country will experience the full potential of our force.
We means smoke signal, a billowing cloud of hands that says your liberation is my liberation and my liberation is your liberation.
There are 2 to 3 million farm workers in our nation who pick, pack, and plant
the food that we eat.
We're not voting our parents' politics anymore.
If I'm a person that looks like you and I see you doing it, then I can do it.
There's one thing that I want to say is like, find your squad and love them hard.
Today, we have another great slate of events, starting with an extraordinary conversation with two of my favorite people who are out there every day fighting for and representing Latinas, the one, the only Stacey Abrams and the incomparable Selena Gomez. And then Rosario Dawson is going to speak to a first-time voter in Florida. Next, two Latinas in fashion talk about working in a highly competitive industry at a time when representation is more important than ever. Later on, check out a cooking demo with my friend and She Se Puede co-founder Eva Longoria and food historian Maite. We will also host our final Latina Power Hour with beauty influencer Kehlani. And we will close out this amazing week with our last after hours gozadera in the She Se Puede virtual lounge with superstar DJ Angie B. Thank you so much for joining us at the first ever She Se Puede Latinas Make a Difference tour. Don't forget to make a plan to vote and tell all your friends and family and comunidad to do the same. And keep an eye out for more exciting news and events from She Se Puede coming soon. Enjoy this beautiful day.
Hi, I'm Jess Morales-Turcato, and I'm one of the co-founders of She Se Puede. Thank you so much for joining this tour and for making a difference in your communities. I've been so excited by everything we're seeing around the country, and we have just a few more days until the election, so this conversation couldn't come at a better time. I have the complete and total honor of introducing two incredible, inspirational women. They are as knowledgeable about makeup as they are about politics. They are powerful and inspiring people who make me want to up my own game and be as awesome as them. So we are just so excited at She Se Puede to be welcoming Selena Gomez and Stacey Abrams in conversation. You probably know Selena, and I do too, from all her amazing music and movies and makeup. I'm even wearing some of it right now because I wanted to honor the way that she is living her life so powerfully and taking control of her business and her relationships and her health. It is so inspiring to me. And Stacey Abrams is one of the most courageous, incredible individuals that I have ever met and have the honor to know. It is so incredible to be able to see and be inspired by her leadership every single day. And so I cannot wait for what I think is going to be a really special conversation. And I'm so glad that we're going to be able to watch it together. So without any further introduction, it is my honor to introduce Selena Gomez and Stacey Abrams in conversation for She Se Puede.
I want to welcome all of you guys for joining the amazing Latinas Make a Difference tour. I'm so excited to be a part of this. I have the opportunity, the incredible opportunity to be talking with Stacey Abrams, who I know a little bit, and it's just been so much fun getting to know you and important to get to know who you are. If you don't mind, I have a few questions for you. So I wanted to ask first this obvious question. Why did you run for office and what made you excited about public service?
Well, before I do that, I want to say thank you to you. Selena, you and I met earlier this year in a conversation about the census. And since then, you have just been such a stalwart helping make certain that communities that are so often left out not only get heard and seen, but that they feel loved. And I just can't thank you enough for the work that you do across platforms, across communities, but always holding true to who you are. And that's a perfect segue into why I ran for office. I didn't.
Thank you.
No, you're amazing, and I'm a huge fan. I also have much more street cred with my 14-year-old niece because I know you. It means a lot because I have very little street cred with her. So no, I grew up in Mississippi. And my parents were working poor, so our family was. I grew up in a family where my parents voted in every election, but no politician knocked on our doors. There were never yard signs in our community because our community was one that was considered irrelevant. They didn't realize that if they'd just taken the time to invest and engage, they could have had people who were showing up to do so much more. When you fast forward, my decision to run for office was mostly because I actually thought I would work for government. I'd interned with the Environmental Protection Agency, with the Office of Management and Budget. I'd been a deputy city attorney, but the through line was I couldn't get politicians to do what I wanted them to do because often they were so focused on their missions and their narratives, it was hard to get their attention to shift. And I understand why, but it occurred to me that the best way to get people to pay attention to the things I cared about was for me to be the person to care about it in political space. And so in 2006, I stopped being a bureaucrat and I ran for public office. I ran for the state legislature. I served in the legislature for 11 years, 7 years as the head of Democrats in the House of Representatives. And in 2018, I wanted to run for the job that I think has some of the most important impact on our communities, especially communities of color, and that is the role of governor. And so I ran for governor in 2018, didn't quite make it, but I'm proud of the race I ran because I intentionally centered communities, not just the Black community, but we were intentional about centering the Latino community, the Asian American community, the disabled community, people who've been marginalized and disadvantaged and written off. My mission as a politician is to never be one of those people who ignored my parents, who ignored my family. I will always do the work of trying to lift those communities up and make sure they have their own voice, that I'm just amplifying it. I'm not speaking for it.
That's amazing. And I think what you have been doing is very noticeable. And I think everyone's been very grateful for that. Okay. Thanks for that. Oh, I feel so good when I'm talking to you. So you sparked an incredible moment in history and exercised incredible personal courage when you confronted voter suppression head on in 2018. How did you find the inner strength for that moment?
When I was running for governor, I didn't talk about voter suppression. My mission was to talk about access to healthcare, access to housing, environmental justice for every community, criminal justice reform, because I know how that can decimate communities, mental health, making sure that we were investing not just in physical healthcare, but mental health care. I had all of these issues I wanted to talk about. But what I learned was that so many of the people I was speaking to weren't going to be able to do anything about it because my opponent, who was the Secretary of State on the Republican side, he had been removing them from the rolls, helping lead the closure of polling places where they could no longer go and vote. That under his leadership, so many communities had been denied access to the right to register or the right to vote. And so by the time my campaign came to its fruition on November 6th, we knew that voter suppression had affected at least 80,000 people that we knew of. And if 80,000 people had told us, we knew 80,000 more people out there just thought it was the way the world worked and they just gave up. And so on the night that I didn't concede, I did my non-concession speech, it was because of this. I could have fought and said, look, here are all the things you did. You purged 1.4 million people. You held 53,000 registrations hostage. You oversaw the closure of 214 polling places. You conducted the single largest voter purge in American history on a single day. But the minute I made it about me, if I had challenged the election to make myself the governor, people would have said that's one more politician, one more person out for herself. And if I wanted people to trust me, to trust that when and if I ever hold that job, I was going to do the work I said, then I needed them to know I was in it for the long haul, that not having the title of governor did not exempt me from the work. And the work that was immediately before me was ensuring that every single Georgian who I asked to get up and go and vote, to stand in those lines, to fight through the storms, that every one of those people had to believe that I was going to stand with them, even when I didn't get what I wanted. And so for me, there was really no question. The day I found out that we were likely not going to win, there was not a moment where I thought, well, I need to just challenge and get the votes for myself. My mission, my responsibility was to speak for the people who've been told that their citizenship wasn't real. Because if theirs isn't real, if we aren't seen as equal under the eyes of the law when it comes to the right to vote, how can we imagine that we will ever have the policies for progress that we deserve?
I think you answered that really well. I also feel like, if I can say, since speaking to you, your confidence and the way you speak has been really, really inspiring and has so much passion behind it. And I'm so honored to be doing this. I just wanted to say that with you. Okay, another question that I have: was running for office easier or harder than you thought it would be? And what should other Latinas know if they're thinking about it too?
So I don't know what personality type you have. I am actually an introvert. I am someone who prefers to be alone. I need time to decompress. I can do the public speaking. I mean, are you an introvert or an extrovert?
I would say I'm an extrovert.
Well, and that's the thing. So there's some people for whom it is energizing to be around people. For me, it's sometimes exhausting. But I know how to manage it. I know how to make my way through it. And introversion and extroversion isn't about whether you're good at public speaking. It's really about, do you draw energy from being around other people, or do you get a little tired? And I'm on the tired side. But what's always driven me, and I appreciate the very kind words you said about my speaking, I learned early on that I was pretty good at getting people to listen to me. My job was to make sure I had something worth saying. And so when I got ready to run for office, I was running, as I said earlier, because I wanted to talk about these issues and I wanted government to do the things it was supposed to do to help the people it was supposed to help. I called my two best friends, and both of them separately laughed for like 5 minutes. They're like, you have to talk to people, don't you? I'm like, yeah, I know. But one of my best friends, her name is Bai-Ling Yen. Bai was, she was the most concerned for me. But when we talked about it, I said, look, part of doing this is about showing it can be done. As a young Black girl, I did not know of a Black politician. And it wasn't until I moved to Atlanta that I started to see Black politicians in everyday spaces. I got to work for a Black woman who became mayor. And when I became Democratic leader, I hired a team that looked like what I was used to. I hired a Black person and a white person. And it was I took myself to task. I was sitting in my office, I'm like, you just replicated exactly what you castigate others for doing. And so I picked up the phone and I called the Georgia Association of Latino Elected Officials and said, I want to hire someone Latino. I want to make certain that my office actually looks like Georgia. I need to make certain that I'm not trying to speak for a community I'm not a part of, but that I know is incredibly important. And they found a young woman who was willing to work with me. I had no money left because I'd already given it to the two people I hired, but she came on board. And she eventually became one of my top lieutenants. She now works for one of the organizations I created. And Jenny, her name is Jenny Castillo. Jenny helped build this just incredible internship program. And I say all that to say this. When I ran for office the first time, it was because I wanted to speak on behalf of communities that needed to be included. And what I learned was that my job wasn't to speak for them. My job was to create a platform and a space for them to speak for themselves. And so if you are a person of color, if you're a Latina, if you're Afro-Latina, if you are Black, no matter who you are, when you stand for office, you're not standing for yourself. You don't get to spend any of the money on yourself. You are creating a space so that someone who looks like you, someone who has had your experiences, suddenly has a belief that they too can do it. And that's what's so exciting about doing this work with you, Selena. You speak for yourself, but you create space for so many others to see themselves as valuable, to see themselves as engaged. And for me, running for office, it's hard because I've got to suspend my natural tendency to be quiet, but I do it because I know that my voice gets added to this incredible narrative. And for Latina women, which is redundant, but for Latinas, we need your voices. You are so much a part of the future of our country, and your power has not yet come to full fruition. But when you are fully empowered, when you are fully engaged, the change that Latinas can make across our country will be transformative. And so for me, I may start out standing as a Black woman, but if I'm doing my job right, every woman of color knows that she should be standing right there with me, especially the Latina population.
That's very moving and so incredible how you have the ability to reach people. And I obviously want to thank you for the compliment, especially from you, because I tend to care a lot, and it's something that I've been doing and focusing on more than ever in my life. So I appreciate that coming from you. Okay, we're gonna get through some more. I don't want to waste your time. What makes you most excited about the new generation of leadership, and which are you also creating and mentoring in so many areas?
In 2015, I started this program with another young woman who worked with me, Ashley Robinson. And Ashley and Jenny actually ran the program together. It was called the Blue Institute. We were trying to train young women and men of color, but we focused a lot on young women in higher office, not only running for office, but running campaigns. Because so often how a candidate campaigns is driven by who they hire. And what we kept hearing was that there were no young people of color to hire. They weren't ready for that world, that the only people who had the experience were young white folks in campaign world. And the problem is it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's that whole narrative, you can't get hired if you don't have experience, but you can't get experience if you don't get hired. And I always believe it's my job to break that cycle and to get you in there so that even if you don't have the experience, you'll get the experience with me, and it'll be such a good experience, you can go out there and replicate it for others. When I think about this generation, I try my best to be one of those people who are seeding the capacity of this generation and saying, here's what you've got, let's grow it, let's tend it, let's make sure it's at full strength. When you add together Generation Y and Generation Z, I'm Generation X, so I'm older than you. But when we take your generation and Generation Y and add them together, that is the single most powerful, the largest contingent of voters in the country. And growing within that population, the Latino population is one of the fastest growing facets. And so when we think about the power of that generation, we can't ignore the diversity. And that diversity is energy. It is experiences. It is a linguistic fluency that can talk across communities, not only with different languages, but with different understandings. And so my excitement is that there are two generations that are coming into their own that have the ability to solve problems I've been talking about and thinking about since I was 18. But I didn't have the numbers. I was Gen X, and while we were a diverse generation, we were still fighting against the needs and the prejudices of those who preceded us. And finally, you all have the numbers and the strength to force the conversations we could never have. It feels like it's been so long since success has been possible, but I want you all to understand that you are that success, that your sheer existence makes something possible I could never have imagined, because there simply weren't enough of us. You can overwhelm the system and make it different.
I would say I agree. And a part of why I wanted to do so much around voting and around getting my generation going is because I believe that my generation specifically gets distracted. And there's so much going on in the world. And for me, I know that I am very blessed. I'm very fortunate to have many wonderful things going on in my life, but making sure that my top priority was this and was leaning into my generation and steering that way as best as I could, because all that stuff will always be there, but this is the one time that we can make a difference. So I feel you there. I have been doing my part as much as I can.
You are.
Okay, so my next question is, Latina voter turnout rates are 14 to 20% lower than non-Hispanic Black women. Our ability to vote is the best, most potent tool at our disposal. What can we do to motivate more women of color to vote?
So first, we have to acknowledge why people don't vote, especially why Latina women, women of color don't vote. When you look around, sometimes you despair. When you see intergenerational poverty, when you see the persistence of prejudice and bigotry, when you see these artificial barriers to your success, it is absolutely understandable that you decide the system just doesn't work. But what I want people to remember is the system changes with every day and with every new addition. And the benefit of being part of the fastest growing contingency is that you are growing your power every single day. And we cannot judge the future based on the past. What I know for the Latina population is that when they voted in Georgia, when the Latino population at large voted, when they tripled their turnout in Georgia, I came within 54,723 votes, becoming the first Black woman in American history to become a governor.
Wow.
And it was not just because, I mean, we had an amazing turnout from Black voters, from AAPI voters, but it was Latino voters who also understood they could make a difference. Now, they were blocked in very real ways by voter suppression. And in fact, it targeted them. And I'd watched this happen for years because I'd been working with Latino organizations to help increase voter registration. And we know there's an intention of suppressing your vote, but they want to suppress your vote because they know how powerful it is when it's let loose. And so the first thing we've got to do is acknowledge the legitimacy of suspicion and of despair. But then we've got to have a conversation about what's possible if we can suspend that suspicion for just one day, for just one vote. If we can get to the place where we believe just one more time that we can make progress, it starts to happen. And we know it happens because across this country, when Latinas step up and use their full power, either as candidates or as voters, they bring along their families, they bring along their communities. And look, election is about math. Let's put aside everything else. We never talked about a path to victory. We talked about the math to victory. If you add up how many Latinas and their families and their communities who do not speak up during elections, you can change the outcome of so many races, which means you can hire people who actually value your community, who understand the restrictions and the impediments that you face, but more importantly, who have a belief that you deserve more. Because ultimately, an election is just about hiring someone to do the job of making our lives better. That's it. And if we abdicate our ability to make those hires, then people who don't want our success, people who do want our silence, who want our labor, but not our values, who want our contributions, but don't want our participation, they win because they are going to show up. And so I connect the dots. If what you want is healthcare, vote for someone who says they believe you deserve healthcare. If what you want is a fair wage for your work, then vote for someone who says they understand that you get paid less for your work. But we've got to connect the dots and make certain that people believe it's worth the fight, but you can't convince someone it's worth a fight when you don't acknowledge the legitimacy of their suspicion. So I start there, but then you move to the positive, which is
absolutely.
You're not wrong about what happened, but this time we can make it better.
And wow, yeah, that was incredible. I just feel like everything that you're targeting, and even just from me being a Latin woman, I could see all of that. It almost sounds simple, if that's not offensive. It sounds very easy, and I think people just are afraid. I think that people are afraid, and they don't really know the power that they have, is what I can tell. And I would hope that they would be strong. And even just hearing what you said, I mean, as a Latina, I was feeling everything you were saying. And I hope that, many, many, many women and men and just all generations are going to be able to watch this and feel just what I felt right now. So I want that to be known. Of course. I have another question.
Yes.
Non-Black Latinas and Black women have so much more in common than many people realize. What are some ways we can come together and really make a difference?
I was reading a story in the New York Times this week about how there's an intentional misinformation campaign that's trying to stir up anger and suspicion and distrust between the Latina community, the Latino community or Latinx community, and Black people. And the goal is to keep us separated because they understand that if if our powers combine, it's game over for the levels of suppression and misinformation. It's game over for the impediments to our success. If we combine our powers, we have the votes to actually create the progress we need to see. You and I had this conversation. Yeah. We talked about mental health issues. For our communities in particular, we have this silence about mental health, but we also have an inability to access resources. If our communities came together and voted together for people who said they will invest, the supports that would be available, the incarceration levels that would decrease, the access that would proliferate would be extraordinary. And Black and brown women, Black and Latina women, together we can get this done because we understand at the most personal level what it means to be disadvantaged, what it means to be marginalized, what it means to be left out. And when you and I had our first conversation, I left there just so excited about the thoughtfulness that you bring to these moments. Not just for you, but the fact that you were asking questions about communities that you touch. And that's what the Latina community can do. It's what the Black women who get, celebrated for what we do in politics. Look, we just try to take care of our family. Yeah. And that's what the Latina population does. You just want to take care of your family. And what I want us to do is what we're doing right now, recognizing that our common bonds are so much stronger than any divisions that people try to sow. Right now, it's coming primarily from conservative media. It's coming from conservative conspiracy theories. But the reality is it happens all the time. There is an intention of dividing us because our combined powers are so incredible. And we have that intersection of Afro-Latinas who know this better than almost anyone else. My view, my vision, my hope is that we lift each other up, that we invest in one another. It is always my pleasure to do whatever I can. When you in America reached out to me about She Se Pueda, it was my mission to be here because I know my success is yoked to your success and my destiny is made brighter and more possible when your destiny is made real.
Wow. No, I honestly, I feel like I needed to hear that because I think, in my personal opinion too, and things I've witnessed, I definitely never thought existed. And to actually be in a situation and it could be compromising, simply being judged by my last name or the look of my father and my family. And so I know one thing that we have in common, and that's passion. I just know it in my heart. And I feel like that is something that hasn't really been talked about. So I'm glad that you mentioned and you brought that up. And it's also good for me to remember that as well. So your home state is Georgia, and we're seeing record-breaking early voting with so many people standing in line for hours and hours to vote. And they're doing it already. Many people say the long waits are another example of voter suppression against communities of color. What can the average person do to ensure their vote is counted, and how can we come together to deal with the voter suppression as a community?
So it is voter suppression to stand in those lines for those hours. Yes, it is a sign of excitement, but it's also a sign of disinvestment, of disinterest. It's a sign of disrespect. We know from research that less money goes into communities of color. So when we have surges in voting, when more people show up, we often have to show up in places where they stopped funding us when there were fewer of us. And because the Black community, the Latin community are growing so fast, we expect to have access to the resources of similarly sized communities, but we don't get those investments. And then you see long lines. But the other reality is that those lines mean those are people who aren't at work, which means they're losing money by the hour. These are folks who have family members at home they need to be taken care of. They've got kids who they have to leave sitting in front of a computer because of distance learning who need their care. And yet they are stuck in this line because they know if they get out of line, they forfeit the next 4 years of opportunity. And so they have to make this choice. Do I serve my present or do I serve my future? And the reality is white folks in middle-class communities don't ever have to make that choice. We deserve to not have to make that choice. And so while I'm excited about the enthusiasm, I absolutely refuse to allow anyone to say that these long lines are okay, because they are voter suppression, because you are making people make a choice about their income and their family versus their vote. But the answer is stay in those lines.
Yeah.
Because the
As
only
I was listening,
Yeah.
it was like, stay. I
Yes.
mean,
Yeah.
that's how much you care. That's genuinely what you said. It is the 4 years that we are looking at. And as much as that all comes into play, all the things that you're talking about are actually a huge part in this election. So it's almost like taking a risk of all of that for the sake of keeping that and doing it better.
Exactly.
I have to say that you've answered these questions in such an epic way, and I just so appreciate everything that you said and what you talked about. And as a Latina woman myself, I'm having chills right now speaking to you, and I'm so excited for people to watch this. I can't wait to get some of my family members to watch this as well. So I want to thank you so much for being a part of all of this. I know that America and I are so happy, and Si Se Puede is very happy. So thank you.
It is my honor, Selena. You, America, Jess, the team, you all are extraordinary, and what you're doing is what we need. And that is reaching out to communities, to women, to Latinas who have the ability to change the future. And we just need people to know their power. And so any way I can be of help, it is always my pleasure. And as you said, Si Se Puede.
Si Se Puede.